The silverware never saw it coming, but tonight, a 12-year-old boy with autism was about to play Beethoven on a napkin dispenser, and one man's $500 dinner was about to come undone. The clink of crystal and low murmurs of high society floated through the velvet-draped dining room of Barclay's, the kind of place where the wine list had more Latin than a law school syllabus. Waiters glided like ghosts, and any sound above a whisper was considered a form of violence. Then came the tap. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the back corner table, the one near the antique piano no one touched. A small black boy sat there alone, fingers dancing across a napkin dispenser like he was coaxing notes from ivory. It wasn't random. There was rhythm, intent, something strangely beautiful. "What is that?" The voice cracked like a whip across the silence, deep, dismissive, polished with authority. Heads turned. The spell broke. Standing now near the wine bar was him, Charles Barkley III, not the basketball player, but the restaurant's owner, a man whose ego had its own reservation, whose tailored suits cost more than some people's annual income. He didn't wait for an answer. His voice rose. "Is this a restaurant or a children's therapy center? I'm not paying $500 for lobster ravioli to be serenaded by—" He looked over, squinting with distaste. A child with issues banging on the furniture. A few diners snickered. One man at a corner booth raised his wine glass in mock salute. "Well said." Tiffany froze where she stood, her tray trembling in her hands. She wore the black and white uniform of the servers, but right now it felt like a costume. Thin armor in front of a firing squad. Her eyes darted to the boy. Jake, her little brother, 12 years old, diagnosed with autism, musically gifted, painfully shy. He hadn't meant to disrupt anything. He never did. Tiffany took a breath that tasted like fire and humiliation. She walked over to the table, knelt beside her brother, and whispered, just loud enough for only him to hear, "Show them, baby. If they're going to laugh, let them laugh in tune." Jake looked up. His eyes, wide, glassy, and unreadable, locked onto hers for a brief second. Then he stood. The room quieted, not out of respect, but confusion. The boy walked past Barkley, past the snickering man with the wine, past the crystal chandeliers and linen-wrapped privilege, and he didn't flinch, not once. He walked straight to the piano in the corner. That piano hadn't been played in years. It was decorative, a talking piece, a hushed rumor, covered in dust, until Jake sat down. He didn't adjust the bench, didn't stretch, just placed his small fingers on the keys, and played. First came a single note, then a phrase, then a flood. Clair de Lune, Debussy, but not the hollow rendition you'd hear at a college recital. Number. This was something else, something ancient, precise. Moonlight made music, and just like that, the entire room forgot to breathe. Tiffany's tray had somehow made it back to the service station. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart wasn't. Her heart was swelling so fast it hurt. Across the room, Barkley opened his mouth, then closed it. His face twisted into confusion, rage, disbelief. A woman near the window gasped. Another covered her mouth with both hands. The maitre d', normally robotic, leaned against the wall like he'd been punched in the gut. By the third movement, the sound engineer from a local theater who happened to be dining alone was filming with his phone. Quiet tears tracked down his face. By the final chord, no one was eating. No one was sipping. Every head was turned. Every eye was wet. Jake stood up, said nothing, walked back to his seat. The room exploded, not in chaos, not in applause, in silence. A silence louder than anything. And then, A single clap. From the back. A man in a brown wool coat, a violin case at his feet. "I was outside," he said, stepping forward, voice trembling. "I'm first chair violinist with the Boston Symphony. I heard him through the window." He turned to Barkley. "And if you ever silence a sound like that again, you don't deserve to own a restaurant." Barkley's jaw clenched, but the moment had already slipped away from him. It belonged to someone else now, to the boy with the music, to the sister with the fire, to the truth that doesn't need applause, it just needs to be said. The next morning, Tiffany Wilson stood in the cramped staff locker room, fingers trembling over the zipper of her serving vest. She hadn't slept. She hadn't cried. The internet had done all that for her. Her phone kept buzzing in her pocket, messages from strangers, friends, trolls, mothers of autistic children, music teachers, celebrities, and somewhere in that avalanche of noise, one thing kept repeating. The boy in the restaurant, the moonlight, the silence after. But not everyone was enchanted. Not everyone clapped. Celebrity now, huh? Lauren, the blonde hostess, passed behind Tiffany, flipping her straightened hair. "Can't wait for the next dinner show. Maybe your brother can balance forks on his head this time." Tiffany didn't look up. She'd learned not to. People like Lauren never punched you in the face. They preferred whispers and side eyes. And they hated when someone they considered beneath them stole the spotlight. Especially when that someone was 12 years old, black, autistic, and brilliant. She buttoned her vest slowly, jaw clenched. In the back of her mind, she kept replaying last night, the tremor in Barkley's voice, the quiet afterward, the way people stared like they'd seen a ghost play piano. And then Jake, returning to their table like it was nothing, like he hadn't just redefined everyone's understanding of music in under 3 minutes. He didn't speak the rest of the night. He rarely did. But his fingers tapped on her arm while they waited for the bus, in rhythms she didn't recognize but felt in her chest. The tapping meant he was okay. That's all she needed. She had raised him since she was 17. Their mom was gone, vanished into addiction. Their father was a mugshot and a memory. And Jake? He had been labeled broken before he could even tie his shoes. But she knew better. Her brother wasn't broken. He was just in a different key. Back inside the restaurant, things had changed, but not the way Tiffany expected. Mr. Barkley hadn't spoken to her, not directly. Instead, a new rule had been taped to the staff bulletin board. No guests permitted during service hours. Staff family members must remain off-premises. Management. Subtle, like a knife wrapped in linen. By noon, the whispers had begun. "Did you see the views on that video? 12 million, corporate's gonna flip. That piano's been broken for years. Is he like, really autistic? Or just one of those TikTok kids?" Tiffany swallowed the words burning at the back of her throat. She had no room to fight. Not yet. Because Jake didn't belong to a PR stunt. And this wasn't over. That night, Tiffany came home to find her brother sitting on the floor, headphones on, eyes closed, rocking gently in rhythm. The keyboard she'd bought from Craigslist sat in front of him, missing 2 black keys and 1 leg. But it didn't matter. His fingers floated over the plastic like they were touching silk. She sat on the couch, watching him, and for the first time in a long time, she asked herself, what if we didn't have to survive? What if we could live? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Tiffany Wilson?" The voice was older, warm, precise. "My name is Arthur Klein. I'm the program director for the Boston Youth Philharmonic." She straightened. "Yes? I was there, last night, back corner table, Pinot Noir, bad date." Tiffany blinked. "Oh. I watched your brother play Clair de Lune like he was born with moonlight in his bones." She said nothing. I want him to audition, Arthur continued. We're hosting a showcase for gifted students from underrepresented backgrounds. One slot is open. I'd like it to be his. Silence. Then, he doesn't talk much. He doesn't have to. Tiffany gripped the phone tighter. We've never had lessons. He doesn't read music. Doesn't matter. Bring him. The audition was Saturday, but by Thursday, Barclays had other plans. When Tiffany clocked in, two men in suits were already in the dining room. They weren't ordering. They were pointing, measuring, taking pictures of the piano. Who are they? She whispered to the hostess. Investors, she replied with a smug smile, here to clean up the circus. That evening, right before service, the piano was wheeled out. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. When Tiffany approached Barclay, he didn't look up from his tablet. Excuse me, sir, why? That instrument, he interrupted, has become a distraction. We run a business, not a charity. Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. Sir, that's my brother's. He's not a performer. He's a liability. You forget. I let you keep your job after last night's scene, but I won't let this place become a spectacle. Her voice dropped, cold and measured. You didn't let me keep anything. I earned my place here. Every shift, every plate, every insult. He looked at her, finally. Then maybe you've overstayed it. She said nothing, because Barclay wasn't the enemy. He was the system, wrapped in silk and ego. But Tiffany had already decided. Jake wouldn't play for them again. He would play above them. Friday came, and with it, more emails, more requests for interviews, more calls from media outlets. But Tiffany said no to all of them, because Jake didn't need the world watching. Not yet. He needed one moment, one stage, and one shot to show who he really was. Saturday arrived like a held breath. They stood outside the Boston Youth Philharmonic Hall, Jake clutching his headphones, Tiffany clutching his hand. Inside, a dozen prodigies warmed up, polished, rehearsed, clean-cut. Jake looked wrong, small, out of place, until his fingers found the keys. And the moment began. He didn't play Clair de Lune this time. He played something new, something he'd written himself. There were no notes on paper, no sheet music, just a 12-year-old boy with autism and a story in his hands. And by the time the last chord rang through the concert hall, every person in that room understood. He didn't just belong, he defined the space. Backstage, Arthur Klein wiped a tear from his cheek. Where has he been hiding? He whispered. Tiffany smiled. Right in front of people who never bothered to look. 3 weeks later, the restaurant was unrecognizable, not from the decor. The chandeliers still glowed, the overpriced entrees still steamed beneath polished domes, but from the tension in the air. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about reputation, about damage control, because someone had leaked the footage, not just the viral video of Jake playing Debussy, but the unedited video, the one where Charles Barkley III stood in his pressed Armani blazer, mocking a boy for having a disability, pointing, raising his voice, calling him a disruption. The internet didn't forgive, and it never forgot. Within days, hashtags started trending. Number, let Jake play. Number, Clair de Lune. Kid number Barclay's boycott. Food critics pulled reviews. Parents of neurodivergent children flooded Yelp. Activists picketed the front entrance. By the end of the week, 3 investors pulled out. 2 sponsors distanced themselves. 1 wine brand went public. We stand with talent, not tantrums. And yet, Barkley held his ground. He posted a vague apology. Something about upholding standards, being misunderstood, striving for inclusivity. It was sanitized, market-tested, and completely hollow. What he didn't expect was who came through the door next. It was a Thursday evening. The dining room was half empty. No music, no buzz, only whispers and cautious glances. Then the front doors opened, and in walked them. Jake, Tiffany, and Arthur Klein, director of the Boston Youth Philharmonic. Barkley looked up from his tablet and nearly dropped it. Tiffany walked slowly, deliberately, heels clicking against the marble like punctuation marks. Her uniform was gone. She wore white now. Clean, proud, professional. A statement. Jake walked beside her, headphones draped around his neck, fingers drumming lightly on his thigh. They didn't need to be loud. The room hushed around them. Barkley stood. "What is this?" Arthur spoke first. "An intervention." "What?" Barkley scoffed. "You don't know me, Mr. Barkley, but I know who you are, and I know what you said about this boy, and I watched him play a piece of music that left our entire symphony speechless." He took a step closer. "I've worked with prodigies for 20 years. Jake Wilson is one of the most gifted musicians I've ever heard. Not gifted for his condition, not impressive for his age. I mean, period." Barkley smirked, cold and dismissive. "This is a restaurant, not a music school." Arthur didn't flinch. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before the world turned your restaurant into a cautionary tale." A pause. Then Tiffany stepped forward. "You once told me this wasn't a place for distractions, that Jake was a disruption, but the only thing he disrupted was the lie." Barkley's smile faded. "What lie?" he asked tightly. "That you built this place for people who matter," she said, eyes steady. "Turns out, you just built it for people who look like you, think like you, spend like you." She motioned toward Jake, who stood quietly, eyes on the floor. "He's 12. He doesn't speak like others. He doesn't learn like others. But when he touches a piano, he creates worlds. And all you saw was a child ruining your ambiance." The room had gone silent. Waiters stood frozen. Guests listened with held breath. Tiffany took a breath of her own, then turned to the corner, to the empty space where the piano had once stood. "Bring it back." "What?" Barkley said. "You want your business back? Your reputation? Your waiting list?" She gestured to the open corner. "Then bring the piano back. Let the boy play." Barkley looked around. He saw the phones, the eyes, the tension. This was no longer his room. It was hers. That Saturday night, the restaurant reached capacity for the first time since the scandal broke. But people didn't come for oysters. They came for him. The piano had been returned, cleaned, polished, centered under the soft lights like an altar. Jake walked through the aisle slowly, a bit stiff in his new navy suit. He hated collars, but he wore it anyway. For this. He sat down and didn't play Debussy, didn't play Beethoven. He played Jake, a composition of his own. It began quietly, a single key, then two, like footsteps in fresh snow, then rhythm, structure, emotion. It rose like breath, dipped like sorrow, pulsed like defiance. It was a song about being overlooked, about waiting outside while the world moved on, about seeing more than you could say. And it broke the room open. When he finished, no one clapped at first, because no one could. They were too stunned, too moved, too changed. Then a single person stood, then another, and another, until the entire restaurant was on its feet, not for the food, not for the brand, not for the billionaire who once ruled this space, for Jake Wilson. Later, as the crowd filed out and the lights dimmed, Jake sat at the piano, eyes closed, fingers resting softly on the keys. Tiffany leaned beside him, tears shining in her eyes. "You okay?" she whispered. He nodded and tapped her arm twice, his secret rhythm for yes. From the far side of the room, Barkley watched, no power in his eyes, no arrogance, just silence. He turned and walked out alone, because this was no longer his place. It never really was. A week later, Jake's audition video reached 20 million views. He was invited to perform at Carnegie Hall. A full scholarship followed. But more importantly, schools started changing policies. Restaurants reviewed their training. And a quiet revolution began, not with protests or politics or platforms, but with an autistic boy, a broken piano, and moonlight made music.